Hey y'all, welcome back. If you're new around here, today is one of my favorite videos is to put out on my channel, and it's because I'm going to be ranking the last couple palettes that I've tried. These are all new palettes to my collection, and I have tested them out several times. Feel like I got a solid review on them, and I'm going to sit down and share with you guys my review today, ranking them from my least favorite all the way up to my most favorite. And for today's video, I typically like to do 5 or 10, but today I do have 6 palettes because I have 6 palettes that I have finished, and instead of holding one over, I'm just going to do 6 palettes today. So yeah, today I'm going to have my full review for all 6 of these palettes. Several of them are very new. All of them are relatively new, but might be a couple months after they've launched, which is kind of old in the makeup community, but they're new to me, and I have officially got my review, and I'm ready to share that with you today. So if you've never seen one of these types of videos, I'm going to go through and I'm going to not only give you guys my review and tell you guys what I think about the palette, but I'm also going to share with you guys pictures of all the looks that I did. I'll share with you any reels that I made over on my Instagram page where I featured the palette, and also I will show you guys arm swatches so you guys can see how they swatch on my arms and show you guys exactly how much building up I had to do, whatever the case is, just to give you guys a really nice, well-rounded type of review. So if that sounds interesting to you, let's go ahead and dive right into these 6 palettes that I reviewed. I'm going to start with my worst palette and working my way all the way up to my #1 palette that I tried. Alright, so gonna start, as I said, with the worst palette that I tried, and I do want to clarify in saying that this is the worst out of all 6 palettes that I tried. I was very happy that I didn't try any palettes that were an absolute dud this past month, but just preference-wise, that's where I really ranked them. Not only how they worked, but just which type of palettes that I reach for, which type of palettes that I enjoy working with the most. That's how I rank them. So anyway, for the bottom of this countdown, it's gonna have to go to Nomad Cosmetics' new Santa's Village palette. Now this little 9-pan palette is a lot of fun, but there were just some limitations and some aspects about this palette that just didn't make it one of my favorites. But I am happy to say that quality-wise, it's a very nice palette. The mattes are beautiful, they're very smooth, they're very pigmented, they're very easy to work with, and the shimmers are very beautiful on the eyes. The reason that I'm putting this at the bottom for me is because the shimmers, the way to make them work the best and the easiest is to use your finger. If you use a brush, it's just a big hassle. You don't get the payoff, you don't get this beautiful reflect that you see in the pan on your eyes. It makes a mess, it flakes everywhere. So your finger is best, which just personally I don't love using my finger. And then also with the mattes, they are beautiful, they're very nice, but they are very drastic in the selection that they put in here, in that you have a really dark, like green, hunter green, black type of shade, then you have a gray, you have a white that really doesn't do much on my skin tone, and then you have a red. So having those be the only mattes, I found it a little bit tricky, challenging, and interesting trying to create looks with them. I felt like I needed one more in-between color that could really work to pair with the black or the dark green. It looks black until you use it, and then it's like, okay, that's a little greeny. That shade and the gray, just to help it be easier to blend, because I felt like every time I dipped into this palette, if I wasn't going for the red, I had to kind of just do a black grayed out, smoked out outer corner, and I just felt like I needed another color because it just took a little bit of time. I mean, I could get there. It wasn't like it was patching, it wasn't, you know, looking bad, but it just took a while to blend out such a dark tone on the outer corner of my eye when I didn't have a couple other shades to help make it, you know, nice and effortless and nice and seamless transition. So those are the reasons I'm putting it down low and this countdown, but as I said, it is a fantastic palette. It definitely would shine best as a companion palette to someone who likes a lot of intense sparkly and doesn't mind using their fingers, but as I said, I do mind, so that's kind of why I knock it a little bit, but it is very pretty. I don't personally see these as multi-chromes. They're definitely more duochrome in their shift, or just very shiny. I don't know if they're meant to be multi-chromes, duochromes, or whatever. I honestly can't remember. I thought they were a type of special finish, but when I'm wearing them, they're just incredibly sparkly, and sometimes some of them have a little bit of like a shift that you can kind of subtly see. I'm not very good at saying it. I just enjoy wearing it for the sparkly, intense, very almost like liquid sparkle on your eyes. It's very pretty, but as far as like seeing shifts, I kind of struggled to really see shifts in person. It was just very pretty on the eyes, but overall it is a nice palette. Not to dog this palette at all, but just trying to explain to you why I am ranking it a lot lower than all the other palettes. You know, I'm ranking it the last out of all the other palettes that I'm reviewing today, is just because of those preferences and the choices they made with the colors they put in here. For me personally, didn't jive very well. However, I could see me enjoying this palette a lot more with like a companion palette, having other mattes to work into this, but even then it wouldn't rank super high because, like I said, I'm not crazy about the shimmers having to apply them. So with all that said, all those reasonings being, that's why I'm placing it where it's at, but it is a nice palette. I was very happy with the wear time. The shimmers, while they are beautiful, they do, you know, do a decent amount of transfer just because of the consistency they're at. So if you're someone who likes that very shiny, sparkly, kind of messy look and don't mind that it gets kind of all over up into your brow bone, that type of thing throughout the day, I think you'll really enjoy this, and the intense shine and the intensity of these shimmers are very very pretty. I can't deny that. So definitely I feel like this palette is made for the person who loves this sparkle. If you're a matte lover like me, I feel like this palette is kind of like, you know, take it or leave it type of thing. But if you love the sparkle, this is very, very pretty. And a great theme for the palette, since it is supposed to be, you know, Santa's village, but the Aurora Borealis, however you say that, you know, with all of the changing lights and all that stuff, it does make sense to have it be so heavy centered on the very special shimmer shadows and kind of toppery type of shadows. So overall, I thought it was very nice. And I appreciate that while these are very much like a topper type of shadow in that they have iridescent sparkle but not a lot of color to them, you can build them up and get a nice, intense, impactful application on your eyes, so you don't have to put anything underneath it, and you can still tell like it's color, if that makes sense. It's not like just transparent sparkle is what I'm trying to say. So I appreciate that about it, because I'm definitely someone who likes color over just transparent sparkle, and this was able to give me that along with intense, beautiful sparkle that was very, very pretty to look at and very, very pretty on the eyes. So overall, it's a nice palette. Definitely don't love it. The quality was nice, so I can, you know, dog it for that, but all my preference wise is why I'm placing it pretty low. Next up, let's talk about the NBA Cosmetics Pumpkin Kisses and Autumn Wishes palette. This palette is one of my favorite type of fall palettes because it's just got the oranges, the burgundies, the greens, the bronze, the gold. It's got a lovely array of colors. I really did have fun with this palette. It's got a nice formula when it comes to the shimmers. They're very pretty and very nice to work with. And then the mattes, while they are a bit more dry, some of them be kind of tricky to pick up. Other ones of them are dry but pick up amazingly. So it's not the most amazing matte formula that I've tried. However, using it and using it with brushes, I would just kind of stab my brush a little bit harder into the pan, and I was able to get really nice application on my eyes. I did a video with this palette. I always try to link the videos down below where I feature these palettes if you're at all curious, but I was able to get really pretty looks. I think I did 5 or 6 looks in total. You guys are obviously going to see it here soon, but overall I thought the application, the way they go on the eyes and the way they perform for the looks was very nice. I didn't have to really struggle or work out to get enough pigmentation. I did never have any issues of patching or blending away or not wanting to show up, but in like playing with them, messing with them, and swatching it on my arm and stuff like that, they don't look the best. I'll definitely say, like, it looks pretty dry and lackluster in the swatches. However, using them in eye looks, I honestly wasn't mad at it. I thought it did a decent job. And overall, the color story definitely helps me really enjoy it because it is such a beautiful color story. Definitely very fall-esque in my opinion. I love these tones when it comes to fall and the really nice bright orange. The shimmers also are really pretty. As I said, these two in the middle, Foliage and Crisp, are very special type of like smooth, almost super shock type of formula. They got tons of sparkle in it, very easy to apply, very beautiful. And then Fireside and Candy Corn. Fireside has a little bit of intensity, but those two are much more just like normal type of shimmers. They got a lot of color to them. They are easy to go on. They stand out on the eyes, but they don't have a ton of different type of sparkles in them like the other two shades do. And then Equinox also is a more, you know, sparkly type of shade, but it is just a champagne shade. So as far as like color, intensity, and like beautifulness with the sparkliness, it doesn't stand out too much, but it gives a really nice champagne-y, very champagne-y sparkle to your eyelids. If you use it all over your eyelids, it is very pretty. I tended to just use it over, you know, as an inner corner highlight, and it was very pretty for that. So overall, a nice little palette. Didn't blow my socks off with the quality, you know, as I was saying with the mattes, but they do work out well to create looks. And having tried this, I am curious to try more of NBA Cosmetics in the future. I feel like they got a really solid, you know, formula when it comes to their shimmers, and hopefully they'll continue to improve on their mattes. I've tried their matte formula in the past, and I feel like it was a little bit better than what was in here, so I don't know if they're trying to tweak things, change things up. I should clarify that I tried their matte formula in singles. They've always sold singles beforehand. This is the first time I've tried one of their palettes, so I don't know if it's just some trial and error. Hopefully they'll continue to improve their matte formula, but I'm at least happy that they show up. It's easy to work with. It goes on the eyes, even if it doesn't feel the best and look the best when you swatch it. I thought it performed nicely in looks, which is the most important part, for it to perform nicely when you're creating looks with it. So overall, a nice palette. Didn't blow my socks off. I really did love the colors that I got, the color story, and that type of eye looks that I got. Definitely some of my favorite type of looks. So that's why I had to get a little bit higher than the previous palette. But overall, it's a decent palette, and I'm definitely curious to try more from the brand. Okay, next up is going to be the Sigma Alice in Wonderland palette. This palette I didn't really pick up for the Alice in Wonderland aspect of it because I'm not into Alice in Wonderland. However, I picked it up for the color story because the color story was definitely something I was intrigued by, and also I've been so curious to try Sigma for so very long. I feel like they've really come a long way in the last couple of years improving their formula, but I've been waiting for that palette that really grabs my attention for me to actually try them. So this is the first time I've tried a Sigma palette in years. I'm pretty sure I've tried one, but that might have been like in 2018, 2017. It's been a while, so I was super excited to pick this palette up to try, and overall I really did like the palette. The matte formula is so nice, so good, definitely love. The only issue with me with this palette is that there aren't a whole lot of mattes. We have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 mattes in this whole palette, and then you have some, like, I wouldn't really call them shimmers, but they're definitely not mattes. They're more like a very subtle, almost a satin, but not really a satin. I don't think I'm making sense, but there are a couple of shades, like I think this Wonderland, and then even March here, that is a shimmer, but it's just such a soft, subtle type of shimmer. Alice too, it's a shimmer, but it's more of just a very soft type of subtle shimmer that you could almost use it like you would a matte, and that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about those. They're very subtle, they're not very, like, very show-stopping when it comes to putting it all over your eyes as a shimmer. They're just very subtle, as I've said a million times, but they're nice in the outer corner. They're nice to kind of help, you know, mesh and blend maybe a really nice intense shimmer to the outer corner, that type of thing. So they do have their place, but definitely didn't wow me, I should say that. And then the shades, the shimmer shades specifically that actually wowed me and I thought were pretty was Tea Party and Cheshire. Mr. Walrus was nice, but the color just didn't like wow me too much because it was such a neutral color. And then White Rabbit here. Those were the colors, those were the shimmers that I put on my lid and I was like, wow, this is really pretty. It's very intense. It's got some sparkle to it. It almost looks, you know, like intense. I wouldn't say metallic or like liquid shine or anything like that, but it definitely does look like a very intense, very pretty type of shimmer. So I thought those were really pretty, but there were definitely some shimmers in here that I was just like, I could skip over that. It didn't really impress me much. I think the one that disappointed me the most had to have been Alice, just because it's like a really gray blue, but like, I don't know, it's just, when I used it, it was very like, oh, okay, like anticlimactic, I guess you could say. Also, Lost is like a black shimmer slash glittery type of shade. I used it in my outer corner and just kind of blended from there because I didn't want to have it all over my lid, and it worked very nice to blend out in your outer corner. I didn't notice it causing any issues with blending the mattes into it. I didn't notice it like a ton of the glitter falling all over my face throughout the day. It does fall though, because I would put that shade in my outer corner. As I was doing my look, all of the glitter, sparkle, and stuff like that would just fall out as I was blending, which I didn't mind because I wanted it to look more matte anyway, but it doesn't stay if you're at all curious. At least it didn't for me. So overall, there are definitely like hits and misses in this palette for me. I wouldn't say overall that I loved both mattes and shimmers. I really enjoyed the mattes. I wish there was more. That was definitely the biggest downside to this, is that there wasn't enough mattes for me to play with. And then the shimmers were like 50-50. Some I thought were nice and decent. Others were just like, I didn't even want to bother using because they just were so anticlimactic. I did really enjoy the color story though. It was a very interesting type of color story with the mix that they chose for the colors with the mattes and shimmers. The type of eye looks that I got from this palette I thought were very fun and different and unique and interesting, and you guys know for me that's always very important when I'm going into a palette. I like to be challenged a little bit, and I also like to be able to get different type of looks from a palette than just like a typical kind of like, you know, monochromatic look or neutral look, that type of thing. I like to play around and mix up my colors and put different colors in different spots and make it all blend and mesh well at the end. And this was definitely a palette that I felt like I could get creative, but it still all was very cohesive in the end and turned out really nicely, and I never had any issues blending and stuff like that. And also wear time is very decent for this palette. I really didn't have an issue at all when it came to this palette with any of the mattes fading, any of the shimmers going crazy up into my brow bone. They went to my crease a little bit, but nothing up into my brow bone, and overall just a really nice palette. And like I said, the mattes really blew me away. So in future with Sigma palettes, if I see them launch a palette that is heavy on the mattes with colors that intrigue me, I'd definitely be open to buying and trying more from them. But the shimmers, I feel like really, I don't know, I'm gonna continue watching and seeing and whatnot, but they definitely didn't wow me, didn't impress me. They got a couple of shades that I hope they continue to use that formula in future, because they are at least special and they, you know, they look very pretty, but there were some of them were just kind of like, okay. But overall, I really did enjoy, you know, using my Alice in Wonderland palette, and whenever I created looks, I got a lot of compliments on my videos of like, what palette are you using, or, you know, what did you use today? I really liked how that look turned out. So it's a very nice palette that I feel like is that perfect bridge between having a very neutral palette, but not too boring. You got some color, you got some little pop of something fun in there, or you can go all out and really focus on the color and get a really nice popping look. So overall, I had a lot of fun with this palette, definitely enjoyed it, definitely recommend, but it's landing right there in the middle as far as like, you know, wowing me for all the palettes that I tried. It's landing right there in the middle because I've tried some really cool palettes recently. I am talking way too much. Let's keep going. This is the Oden's Eye Christmas Eve palette. This is such a nice palette. This is a really cool color story. I love the cool tone aspect of it, but you got some pops in there that's really interesting. Now, the reason I placed this where it's at is because there are more chunkier shimmers in this palette than there Merry Christmas. I almost said Happy Christmas. Some of the shimmers are just a lot chunkier, and there's more of them in this palette than in the previous one. And also this shade, this yellow shade, I think is really pretty, pretty addition to this color story. However, it's one of those satiny type of shades. So I used it as a matte and it worked okay, but I didn't love how it looked and I didn't love how it was working, and I used it all over my eye as a matte and it worked okay, but I would have just preferred it to have been a matte. Honestly, a really good intense matte, and it almost is, but because of whatever formula it is, when I blend it out, it just didn't look, I don't know, something about blending it didn't look that nice. I didn't enjoy how it looked. It kind of didn't want to, I don't know, it just didn't act and behave how I expect a matte to behave. So that's why I didn't love working with that shadow. It did create and add, you know, the yellow to the looks, which I thought was very pretty and I absolutely loved, but just that shade disappointed me a little bit. So that's why I'm placing it a little bit low. And then also, as I said, the flakies. There's a lot of flakier shadows in here, and while they're pretty, they make a mess all over my eyes, and I just don't like the big mess throughout the day. I don't like when I'm, you know, going throughout the day, it's getting towards dinner time, and I'm blinking and I'm seeing like sparkles in my eyelashes because they've fallen, or I see sparkles like down here because they've fallen. That annoys me personally, so when a palette does that, I definitely notice, and I'm just like, I don't really like that. And this was definitely a palette. This is definitely a culprit when it comes to that, because there were a lot of those type of shades that looked beautiful. Like, I got so many compliments whenever I would do a reel using this palette because the shimmers are just so intense. They are so beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Cannot disagree. However, they're very sparkly, they're very flaky, and they just make a mess. So they're not my favorite personally, but I really did like the color story. The color story is very fun and different. It's kind of like that cool tone blue, but you still have that grunge in there with the grays. You have this kind of like liquid bronzy tone here. Like I said, the addition of the yellow with these and then the green, very neat color story that I really enjoyed playing with it. So I definitely like that aspect of it. And then also to just talk about the quality, mattes are beautiful, just as I would expect when it comes to Oden's Eye and their mattes. Very nice. No qualms there. No issues at all with that. If I'm gonna nitpick at all, it would be that this black and this blue, the black leans very blue when you use it. So having such a dark blue with another dark blue felt a little redundant. I don't know, maybe more of like a bright, bold navy blue would have been a cool addition, but that's definitely nitpicking. Overall, I was very pleased, and you know, as a whole, the palette I really did enjoy. And this is a multi-chrome, so beautiful. I love Oden's Eye multi-chromes because they're so like they're so finely milled, they're so easy to apply, and they're so stunning. Like, they're just absolutely stunning. I love all the multi-chromes in the Legendary Diversity collections. I like the multi-chromes in here. They're just a very nice formula. They're nothing too like chunky and flaky. I think that's why I like them as well. They're so smooth, they're so beautiful, a little bit understated, but still beautiful. And overall, just a really nice palette. So while there were aspects that I loved about this palette, like I said, the color story is so fun, there were also aspects that I wasn't crazy about, so that's why I'm placing it again right here in the middle. It was a lot of fun, and all the looks that I created I definitely did really like, so I had to place it pretty high, but not at the top. So right here in the middle for a really fantastic palette. And if you got your hands on it, let me know down below, because this was a limited edition just for the holidays, so let me know if you picked this one up. Alright, we're getting to the top here. I'm going to give the next spot to the Give Me Glow Teal Nightlife palette, with a caveat that if I were to recommend this palette, I would recommend you getting this palette if you want to, but making sure you add a black to it, because I feel like the palette comes to life for me with a black. This palette is beautiful, but I feel like they could have taken, I think it was this shade, I feel like I didn't use too much because there were these other two, you know, other few greens that I could use to get this shade. So this shade here, what's it called? Sea Princess, I felt like I could have taken out, popped a black in there, and I would have loved it so much. And actually that's what I did with today's look. I just used a little bit of black on my outer corner, and then everything else I grabbed from this palette, and such a beautiful look. I just needed a little bit more depth. You have darker tones in here with this blue and this green, but they don't go that deep. In my opinion, they're more of a mid-tone color. So for me to really love this palette, it needed a black. So I actually pulled out a magnetic palette and I added a black. I also added a purple, which I think would be a fun addition to this palette, because if you look at the cover, I feel like there's those purple elements kind of around the blues and whatnot, and in the night sky that would have been really pretty, and I did use that purple one time. And then this black, I don't have a Gimme Glow black, but you can grab any black. And then these were other Gimme Glow products I put there in case I wanted to use it, but I really focused on those two mattes adding to this palette. And you're going to see in the looks that I share, I'll make sure you'll be able to see. If you can see this palette at the bottom of the picture, that means I added you know, one of these extra colors to the look. But overall, for the most part, I just reached into this. I really did enjoy it. It just needed a little bit more depth to be amazing #1 type of palette for me. So since it didn't have that black in there already with the bundle, that's why I'm placing it right here. But I don't knock it too much, because while this is a palette, it's a single palette. You can buy it as a bundle, or you can just buy the singles and buy the palette by itself. So if you have some of these and you're wanting to buy this palette and you want to hear my recommendation, I would say buy the rest of the colors you need, maybe leave out this shade or whatever shade in here that you don't like as much, and buy or use a black instead, and then it'll be just top notch, so good. So anyway, now I'm moving back past the color story, because again, this is single shadows. Like, this is just a bundle. You can mix it up and whatnot. So I didn't want to knock it too hard on that aspect of it. But moving past that, quality-wise, it's very, very nice. I really do enjoy Gimme Glow's formula when it comes to her mattes, and her shimmers are very nice. I felt like with these shimmers, they were a little bit chunkier than I have remembered from her previous palettes. I feel like previously her shimmers were a little bit more smooth with a ton of sparkle, whereas these, they have a little bit more, like, yes, they're still smooth. Yes, they have a ton of sparkle, but they feel a little bit more, not chunky in a bad way, but almost like flaky, but not flaking off, more like chunks. Am I making sense? Probably not, but hopefully that description helps you a little bit. But like when you actually like touch it, there's just a little bits of chunks, but they're not like chunks of product, like there's something wrong with it. They're just, it's so intense, there's just so much of it, it's very easy to get it chunking up. But again, it's not like flaking off like a flaky shadow, like it's not a pressed flaky at all. So I hope I don't steer you wrong there. But anyway, overall, it's just a little bit different than I remember some of her shadows being. This one also, same thing, it's just a little bit more chunky when you're touching it and using it on your eyes. So when I used them, I tried to be really careful to only pick up a little bit and work to really spread it out so I didn't get that chunky aspect to it. But they are beautiful. They go all up into my brow bone unless I, you know, set it, kind of top it with a clear glitter primer, and then that helps. It doesn't solve the issues. It definitely still kind of travels, but not as insanely as when I don't use it. So if you're someone who doesn't like to see sparkle up in your brow bone, I don't know if you like these two because they are a little bit more messier than I remember, you know, Gimme Glow shimmers in the past being, but overall they're still very pretty. Like if you like a pretty shimmer, these are very, very pretty, very sparkly, very intense, and I don't know if this is supposed to be a multi-chrome or just like a duochrome, but just in case, I'll kind of do this so you guys can maybe see the shift. I'm so bad at this. I feel like I'm a blind man, but I feel like it's blue to purple is what I see. So I think that's a duochrome. I don't know, you'll have to tell me. And then this one is just a really pretty type of blue. I preferred using it as an inner corner highlight because it is that chunkier shadow. So anyway, moving on, I really did enjoy this formula, and the color story is very fun, and I just love the theme of this palette. I think they did great with the packaging and the color story. Like I said, if they would have just changed one of them out for a black, it would have just been 10 out of 10 amazing. But overall, at the end of the day, it's the same type of formula I expect when it comes to Gimme Glow, especially with the mattes. A little bit different with the shimmers, as I said, but nothing too bad. Nothing to deter me from continuing to try Gimme Glow. It just seems a little bit different, but overall very happy with this palette. Love the looks. I really enjoyed the look that I did today, having an all matte look. You guys know I love an all matte look, and yeah, they're just really nice formula that I really do enjoy, so I had to rank it relatively high. And if you want my recommendations, like I said, just change one of them out for a black and I think you'll love it. And overall, I just enjoy owning another palette from Gimme Glow. I think they did fantastic, and I really did like this palette. On the heels of that is going to be the Merry Christmas palette. This palette went a little bit higher because, like I said, it didn't have as many of those chunky type of shimmers in here, and also the colors. The colors, I just really did enjoy this bright orange, the bright green. There were just aspects about it that I really loved, and also the green of multi-chrome was very pretty. So for those reasons, that's why I put it above the Christmas Eve palette. But as a whole, it's just such a fun palette. I love this hot pink shimmer added to this color story. The color story is just so fun. Like, I go into this and I feel like I can think of a different look each time I go into it, especially just having those pops of different type of colors. Like, yes, as a whole, it's a green and red palette, but when you really look at it, it's like, okay, it's a very interesting kind of green and red. You got a pop of hot pink, you have a pop of really, you know, bright orange in there, and then on top of that, you have different shades when it comes to the green. They're almost more of like a gray type green. This is almost like a neon green. This is a multi-chrome green, so depending on what you use it, it's like, I forget what the shift was. It went from green to like pinky yellow. Oh, so beautiful, so beautiful. So as a whole, this color story definitely just took the cake for me as just being so unique, so different, and I just had so much fun playing with it. I love the black, and then for the dark tones, yes, you have a nice solid black, but then you have a really dark red, you have a really dark green to go along with the lighter tone greens, the lighter tone reds, and as a whole, this palette just was just so harmonious to me. That's why I'm placing a little bit higher. And then quality-wise, again, mattes are absolutely beautiful. The multi-chrome, absolutely lovely, and as I said, the shimmers, the rest of the shimmers in here, they're not as chunky as the other palette. I think really with this one, this shade down here was the only one that was so chunky I wasn't a big fan of. The green is a little chunky, but not bad. I can definitely smooth it out, and it's not that bad on my eyes. And then the other ones are a little bit more of like that Super Shock formula, so they're not as flaky and chunky, so I didn't mind them at all. And overall, the orange is very smooth, the pink was very smooth, and overall, just more shimmers in here were easier to work with, and I didn't have that fallout issue like I did, or just the flaking off issue that I did like with the Christmas Eve. This palette was also, of course, limited edition, so I don't think it's available anymore. You'll have to let me know if you picked it up, but of the two, this one definitely stood out to me as just being a little bit more special. Maybe it's because it's warm tones, maybe Maybe it's because it's green and reds. Maybe it's because it has so many greens in it. I don't know, something about it. I just really enjoyed it and thought they did a great job giving you a very Christmas type of palette, but putting a twist on it and putting something different on it that made me create a lot of really fun and unique and different type of eye looks. So that's what I always love about it. Also too, I just have to throw it out there, I love that I could get a very grungy look with this very grungy green and using the multi-chrome or jingle bells over here with a little bit of the black mixed in with some brown. Such a gorgeous grungy look that you wouldn't think you'd get from this palette. So overall, this palette just really impressed me. Great quality per usual when it comes to Oden's eye. I didn't have any issues blending, didn't have any issues working with the palette, and the color story, I thought they did a fantastic job. So definitely had to rank it high in my countdown. Okay, coming in at number 1 is going to be Simply Posh Cosmetics Genuine Gems palette. And if you heard my review of the Fairy Tale Fairies palette, you know that I loved the mattes, but I wasn't crazy about the shimmers. The shimmers were beautiful, but they were very difficult to apply unless you use your finger. And I'm very happy to say that these shimmers, I don't know if they did a whole lot different, but I found them overall a lot easier to apply. I think just maybe one shade, this shade was a little bit like, just use your finger, it's easier. But the others I found really easy to apply with a brush, and I was very happy. I remember using it a couple times, I was like, wait, this is easier than I remember with the Fairy Tale Fairies palette. So I thought that was fantastic. And then with the mattes, I think the mattes are once again a great formula. The only thing that I don't like and that kind of, you know, just takes a little bit away from this palette for me is that there isn't a really dark, deep color. Like, yes, they're dark down here, but they're not dark. Like, I would have enjoyed just a little bit deeper. Again, just throw a black in there and I'll be happy type of thing. It just needed a little bit more depth in here. And also too with the mattes, these three, yes, I can see a need for this and this, but when you have these two colors, it's like, do I really need this? I used them several times, like all three of these in one look, and put them in different places to see if I could tell a difference, and it's like, not really. But again, they're like those grungy yellow oranges that I love, so I'm like, oh well, I don't mind it. So if you're someone who, I don't know, loves pink and purple, maybe having this redundancy in yellow you might not like, but for me, since I really do love a good orange or yellow, having the redundancy in this palette, I'm just like, it's okay. I can let it pass. So just something to keep in mind. But overall, a really nice palette. I really did like the array of colors. It's Genuine Gems is the theme of this palette, and I found it a very fun palette to create looks with. You could go very light and pastel up here, or you can go very rich and jeweled tone, and depending on how you mix and match it, the looks I was able to create were just so fun, different, unique, beautiful. They just stood out in my memory and stood out to me every time I wore them as just being so beautiful. So I love that. You guys know, I said it already in this video, I like to have fun with my makeup and to be able to be creative with the colors that I put together, and I could definitely get it in this palette. Like I said, if it just had a black, I would have been so happy. And honestly, these are magnetic, so I could just swap it out for a black if I wanted to, but you guys know me. I like to keep the palettes intact in my collection, but it is a really nice palette. Overall, very nice color story. It doesn't quite take the place of the Fairy Tale Fairies palette. And I think because the Fairy Tale Fairies palette has such a beautiful combination of colors, and with the pastel, with the depth, I don't know, there's just something about it. Anytime that I paired the pinks and the greens and all those tones that were in there together, I loved it. This one, I really did like it, but I don't think it beats out the Fairy Tale Fairies palette for me, except when it comes to the shimmers. So in this palette, I'm like, I really like the shimmers, and the mattes are really nice, color story is really nice. And the Fairy Tale Fairies palette, I'm like, I really like the color story, I really like the mattes. The shimmers are just nice. And I should clarify, not to say that the mattes in here aren't good. I feel like the quality I find in here are just as good as the palette, the Fairy Tale Fairies palette, which by the way, to having to say Fairy Tale Fairies palette and Genuine Gems isn't so bad, but maybe it's just me. Sometimes I have trouble saying things. Fairy Tale Fairies palette, I feel like I'm always tripping over. Anyway, that has nothing to do with this video. Moving on. Overall, it's a really nice palette. I did enjoy, but as far as like which palette from the brand I like most, I think I still like Fairy Tale Fairies palette a little bit more just because of the color story and the pastel with the depth of the bottom row. Something about that palette I love so much, even though I'm not a fan of the shimmers, but I was happy to see that the shimmers in here were a lot easier to use, and also they were nicer than the other palettes. So that's something to note. I was very happy with all the shimmers in here. So beautiful, and still has the same amount of sparkle. So it's not like they changed it from the Fairy Tale Fairies palette and they're just not as impressive. They still are so impressive, so sparkly, so beautiful on the eyes. Like, they're stunning. So they definitely didn't take away anything when they, I don't even know if they played with the formula, or maybe they just played with the way they pressed these. I don't know what they did here, but they're definitely easier to pick up, but they're still beautiful, just as beautiful as the Fairy Tale Fairies palette. So yeah, overall, it definitely comes in number 1 out of all the palettes that I've tried recently, all the 6 palettes. But as far as taking the place and like trumping the Fairy Tale Fairies palette, that Fairy Tale Fairies palette is just so special. I don't think it has, but it came really close. It's a really nice palette, especially if I could add a black to all the looks. It's fantastic. Alright, so I only reviewed 6 palettes in this Palette Palooza Countdown review video, but I still feel like I talked your ear off. I try to be short and to the point, and I never am. But anyway, hopefully the video was helpful for you guys and you enjoyed hearing my thoughts on all 6 of these palettes. And as always, I'm over on Instagram, LadyKatie92 over there, where I post reels, up close eye pictures, all that sort of thing. And with all that said, I'll see you guys very soon in my next video. Bye guys.